You ever have one of those nights where the world feels like it's closing in, the wind howling like it's got a personal grudge, and then bam, something happens that flips your whole life upside down? That was Mabel Harper's night, a 70-year-old widow in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, when a blizzard roared through and brought troubler, maybe salvation, right to her doorstep. By sunrise, her quiet little street in Willow Creek would be shaking with the rumble of 120 Harleys. And let me tell you, what happened next wasn't just a story, it was the kind of thing that makes you rethink what strength really looks like. It was late, probably past midnight, when the storm hit its peaks, now coming down so thick you couldn't see your own hand in front of your face. Mabel was tucked into her old farmhouse, the one her husband, Tom, built back when they were young and full of dreams. The place was creaky now, sagging under the weight of years and loneliness since Tom passed. She was dozing by the fire, wrapped in a quilt, when this pounding on the door jolted her awake, 3 heavy knocks that made the walls shudder. Now, Willow Creek's a small town, the kind where folks lock their doors at dusk and don't open them for strangers, especially not in a storm like this. Mabel's heart was racing as she grabbed her lantern, her slippers shuffling across the cold floor. She could have ignored it, could have pretended she didn't hear, but Tom's voice was in her head, same as always. Help the stranger, Mabel, no matter who they are. It was his rule, his creed, the thing that kept him human after coming back from Vietnam with scars nobody could see. She cracked the door, and the wind nearly ripped it off its hinges. There they were, 12 figures standing on her porch, leather jackets crusted with ice, faces pale and raw from the cold. Hell's vanguards, their patches said, the kind of bikers the town whispered about like they were the devil's own. Their bikes were half buried in snowdrifts behind them, chrome glinting faintly in the lantern's glow. They looked like ghosts, not men, their breath puffing out in clouds. The tallest one, a guy with a beard like steel wool, stepped forward, his voice rough but shaky. "Ma'am, we're freezing out here. Can you help us?" Mabel's first instinct was to slam the door. Every story she'd ever heard about these guys screamed trouble. But then she saw the youngest one, barely more than a kid, swaying on his feet, his lips blue, his eyes half closed. They weren't outlaws right now. They were just people, and they were in bad shape. "Get inside," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "before you all turn to ice." They hesitated, like they couldn't believe it, then shuffled in, boots dragging snow across her floor. The air filled with the smell of wet leather and frost as they crowded her tiny living room. Mabel shut the door, her pulse hammering, wondering what the hell she'd just done. 12 bikers, strangers, now stood dripping in her home, their eyes flicking over the faded curtains, the stack of firewood, Tom's old service medals on the mantel. She could feel the weight of them, the way they filled the space, and yeah, part of her was scared they could turn on her, scared she'd made a mistake. But then the kid, the one swaying, collapsed right there on her rug, his breath coming out in a wheeze. Mabel didn't think she moved. "Help me get him to the couch," she snapped, and to her surprise, those big, rough guys jumped to it. 2 of them lifted the kid like he was glass, laying him down while Mabel pressed a hand to his forehead. It was burning hot, fever spiking bad. She'd been a nurse's aide back in the day, during the war, when Tom was overseas, and those old instincts kicked in like no time had passed. "Boots off, get those wet clothes away, stoke the fire now," she ordered, and they obeyed, no questions asked. One guy fumbled with the stove, tossing in logs until the flames roared. Another draped his own jacket over the kid. Mabel was already in the kitchen, filling a kettle, grabbing herbs from a jar Tom used to swear by. She didn't know these men, didn't know their stories, but right then, they were hers to save. The room was quiet except for the storm howling outside and the crackle of the fire. Mabel knelt by the kid, pressing a steaming cup of tea to his lips. Slow sips. "Honey," she murmured, her voice soft but firm, like she was talking to one of her own back when she and Tom had kids running around. The kid's eyes fluttered open, confused but grateful, and something shifted in that room. The bikers, who'd come in looking like shadows, started to loosen up. One of them, a big guy with a scar across his cheek, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, you didn't have to do this. Most folks would have left us out there." Mabel looked up, her hands still steadying the cup. "Most folks don't know what it's like to be cold and alone." "I do." She ladled out soup-thin stuff, just veggies and water, but Warman passed bowls around. They took them like they were being handed something holy, spoons moving slow, like they were savoring it. One guy, wiry with tattoos up his neck, spoke up, his voice low. Haven't had a stranger let me in their house in years. People see the bikes, the leather, they bolt their doors. Mabel met his eyes. They see the patches, not the people. I see you. The room went still, not tense, but heavy, like her words had hit something deep. They ate in silence after that. But it wasn't awkward, it was the kind of quiet where people start to understand each other. As the night wore on, the storm kept raging, but inside, things got warmer, not just from the fire. They started talking, real talk, the kind you don't expect from guys like that. The wiry one said his mom used to make soup like Mabel's every Sunday, until she passed a couple years back. Another guy, his hands scarred like he'd fought the world and lost, said he hadn't sat at a family table since his brother didn't make it back from Iraq. Feels wrong without him, he muttered, staring at the floor. Mabel listened, her heart twisting. These weren't the monsters Willow Creek gossiped about. They were just men, carrying hurts too big to put down. She told them about Tom, how he came back from Vietnam different, quieter, how he'd wake up screaming some nights, but still fixed neighbors' cars for free, still believed in people. He always said, help the stranger, Mabel, no matter who they are. That's why I opened the door tonight. The big guy with the scar nodded slow, like he was turning her words over in his head. Sounds like a man worth knowing. Mabel's eyes stung, but she smiled. He was. Then, just before dawn, the kid on the couch started coughing hard, chest-rattling coughs that made Mabel's stomach drop. She was at his side in a second, her hand on his forehead. The fever was back, worse than before. Water on the boil. Fire up higher, she barked, and those bikers, tough as nails, moved like they were her soldiers. She wrapped the kid in dry flannel, mixed herbs into hot water, and stayed right there, wiping his face, whispering to him to hold on. Hours dragged, the storm screaming outside, but Mabel didn't budge, not even when her knees ached or her hands shook. The bikers watched, their faces tight with something like awe. When the kid's breathing finally eased, his fever breaking, the scarred guy spoke up, voice rough. You saved our brother, ma'am. Mabel sank back into her chair, exhausted. He saved himself. I just gave him a chance. Dawn came, gray and cold, the storm finally letting up. Mabel thought that was it, that they'd leave, and she'd go back to her quiet life. But then she heard Ida low rumble, like the earth itself was waking up. She stepped to the window, and her breath caught. From the horizon, a line of Harleys stretched as far as she could see, 120 of them, rolling down the county road like a tidal wave of chrome and leather. The neighbors spilled onto their porches, clutching their kids, slamming doors, thinking the end was coming. Mabel's heart pounded as she stepped outside, the 12 bikers from her house forming a half circle around her, like they were her guard. A man dismounted from the lead bike, tall, with long gray hair and eyes that carried the weight of 1,000 roads. He walked up, boots crunching snow, and took off his gloves. Mrs. Harper, he said, loud enough for the whole street to hear. I'm Caleb Voss, chapter leader. Last night, you saved 12 of my brothers. Fed them, warmed them, kept one alive. Mabel's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Caleb's eyes softened. And it ain't the first time. 20 years ago, you helped a rider in a storm, gave him soup, a bed. That was my cousin. He never forgot you. Mabel's mind flashed back, a young man, frostbitten, on her porch. She'd done what Tom would have done, nothing more. Caleb raised a hand, and the engines cut off, silence crashing down. All 120 riders got off their bikes, boots hitting the ground like thunder. Then they bowed their heads, every single one, to Mabel. Tears blurred her vision. She wasn't invisible anymore, she was seen, honored. Caleb handed her an envelope, heavy with cash. Your debts are gone, he said. No bank's coming for you now. Before she could protest, riders stepped forward with crates, flour, sugar, firewood, shingles. Your roof's done by sundown, Caleb said. Barn, too. The town watched, stunned, as these outlaws turned Mabel's crumbling farm into something solid, alive. They hammered shingles, fixed the barn, stacked wood higher than her porch. Kids started whispering, they're angels for real. And it spread, the whole neighborhood murmuring it like a prayer. By afternoon, The place was transformed, roof patched, barn sturdy, pantry full. A neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, who'd ignored Mabel for years, shuffled over, voice shaky. "If you need anything, Mabel, just say." A biker nearby smirked. "Took you long enough." As dusk fell, Caleb stood with Mabel on her porch. "We ride at dawn," he said, "but you're not alone anymore." He handed her a worn leather glove. "Something to remember us by." Mabel clutched it, tears falling. "Tom would have said you're proof his words were true." Caleb nodded. "Then we ride for him, too." The next morning, the bikers lined up, engines idling low, respectful. They took off their helmets, bowed one last time, then roared off, headlights fading into the dawn. Mabel stood there, glove in hand, neighbors creeping closer, no longer scared. She sat in her rocker that night, whispering to Tom's empty chair, "You were right. Help the stranger, and they come back as family." This story, it's not just about Mabel or those bikers. It's about what happens when you open a door, when you see the person, not the patch. So what do you think? Was Mabel crazy for letting them in? Or was she the strongest one of all? Drop a comment. Share your take. Have you ever taken a chance on someone the world told you to fear? Let's talk about it, because stories like this, they remind us compassion's the real thunder. Hit that subscribe button, and let's keep finding the heart in the storm together.